it's been this big thing going on with people talking about how Beyonce is a better performer than Michael Jackson. And why I think that Beyonce is one of the top 10 greatest performers of all time. I don't know if she's better than to put her to put in this class with who my top four, my Mount Rushmore would always be Michael Jackson, Prince, James Brown, and Jackie Wilson. And these four guys, they will be on stage by themselves and put on a great show. They didn't need a bunch of pyro. They didn't need 50 dancers. They didn't need none of that. They could be on stage by themselves. Look, Michael Jackson moonwalked in 1983. 40 years later, we still talking about Michael Jackson moonwalking in 1983. If we see Chris Brown, Genuine, Usher, Cisco, any one of these guys, any Marion, any one of these guys that call themselves a dancer, moonwalk, we attribute that back to Michael Jackson, who actually got it from a guy named Jeffrey Daniels. But Michael put it on the map, you know. And he did that by himself. I think about Prince and Purple Rain, and like the best song to me in the world was Purple Rain, and it had nothing to do with everybody. It was just Prince by himself performing, you know. And I've watched Prince concerts before. He doesn't have a large group of dancers. He's just up there and he's doing his thing. And then you get someone like Beyonce, who, you know, is great, but she has like 40 dancers and she has pyros going on. And you ask yourself, like, how much of that, like, if she was up there by herself performing, how great would that be? Don't get it wrong. I've seen Michael, you know, like the Dangerous performance where he had like 60 dancers, and right behind it, he goes by himself and does "You Are Not Alone," where he's like on stage by himself. Or, you know, he'll do some with the Jackson Brothers, and then he did Billie Jean. Or he'll do some with a bunch of dance, like The Way You Made Me Feel, the Grammy show, and then he does Man in the Mirror. But the thing was that always, like, outside of the Dangerous performance, the best part of the performance was him on stage by himself. The way that he was able to own the crowd. You look at his concerts, he might have had 4 dancers with him, you know, to mimic his brothers. But there was a lot of stuff he just did by himself on stage alone. Human Nature, Billie Jean. Some of the ones like Beat It and Thriller, you know, he would have a bunch of dancers up there with him, working day and night, things like that. But for the most part, he was by himself. And so I find it like really challenging when we put her in that and put people in that echelon. But I understand too that it's also a thing of the times. And like Beyonce is that thing right now. It's kind of like LeBron James in basketball, and saying that he's better than Michael Jordan. You know, we say that because, you know, Jordan's gone and this generation is growing up off of this kind of performance. But, you know, if you look at history and look at, like I said before, you know, it'd be easy for me to put Usher and them in this category. But I've seen like James Brown perform, and I can just imagine, you know, just how revolutionary that was. And then just as much he inspired Michael. And so a lot of times I feel like we get lost in it because it's like when you're saying things like Beyonce's greatest, you know, I look at some magazines and like the top 10 albums of all time, and yet there's not an album by the Beatles in there. How don't you have an album by the Beatles in there? Like, the Beatles have so many classic albums, you know. How's that possible? You know, well, because, you know, I was born in 1990, and so my whole list consists of albums that came out in 1990. I didn't experience none of that, you know. Top 10 basketball players of all time, and you don't have Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Dr. J. Why? Because you didn't see those guys. So, you know, you're like, yeah, my Kobe's the greatest of all time. Kobe is nowhere in the top 20. You know, you look at like other players' careers, he's nowhere in the top 10. You know, but 20 years, 1 MVP, you know, and that's basketball. We'll talk about that later on in another conversation. But I think Beyonce get caught in that same thing too, that she's here and she's the best by far. There is not a single artist that can outperform Beyonce today. I stand on that, you know. I've seen, you know, I think if Chris Brown could get his act together, he probably could be a great performer, but he's not there yet. Drake doesn't have nearly the vocal talent that Beyonce has. nor the moves. And I think that, but I like I said, I look at Beyonce and it's just like it's a show. So it's like 50 people on stage, there's a lot of pyro going on, and she's great in that setting. But put on the stage by herself and have her perform, it'll be okay. That's my thoughts. Holler at y'all later. I'm B.